Chapter 16 to 18. Ray and Conan were going down the mountains, hand in hand. Ray was leisure while Conan was outright skipping. She didn't really care where they were as long as she was with Ray. They were almost in the closest village to the mountain and finally reached a road frequented by merchants that want to avoid shinobi skirmishes. Conan suddenly stopped skipping and was about to raise her free hand, her papers about to burst from her sleeve, but Ray squeezed the hand he held. Conan looked at him questioningly only to find him minutely shaking his head. Shrugging, they continued. Suddenly, a band of 10 men jumped out of the bushes. They barely scrambled out of them with scratches all around their bodies and barely managed to surround Ray and Conan in a very loose formation. They held weapons. More like gardening tools, really. Their clothes were torn and their expressions distraught as they panted. The men weren't even burly. More like starving. The leader even had to catch his breath for a few seconds before he looked ready to let out a sound again. How underwhelming, thought Ray as he was deadpanning at the men. TSK, thought Conan as she rolled her eyes, infusing her paper with futon chakra. Only one gesture from Ray and she was ready to slaughter these nuisances. Why you? Su surrender and we will not harm you. Har, hardly. Ray dryly uttered. The bandits looked at the 12-years-old looking boy as if he was an idiot. He was being threatened by a bunch of powerful men and was openly mocking them. Yo, you should know what's best for you. The leader shouted. He was getting more and more uneasy about these two kids by the second. Normal kids would be already pissing themselves, but these two looked at him as if he was insane. He chose them as a target because their clothes looked expensive. They looked wealthy. At worst, he could probably ask for a ransom from some wealthy merchant who was most likely their father. But look, man, Ray slowly but purposefully puffed his chikudo into existence, making the men freeze. We can do this your way, or we can do it my way. The bandits froze. They have never seen a ninja in their life. Ninjas were rare. But they did hear about the might of theirs. After all, their country was ravaged by shinobi. The merchants sang the atrocities these things did. Whole towns disappearing. Yes, shinobis were a scary existence for the common folk. Especially during a war. I am sorry. The leader threw himself on his knees, straight into Dajiza. We didn't mean to shinobi no, shinobi-sama. We didn't mean to. The rest of the bandits quickly followed. Ray almost did a double take. He could only awkwardly look at snickering Conan. Look, man. If you want to play a bandit, at least get the mannerism right, okay? Now, lead us to your village. Ray rubbed his forehead in exasperation at these idiots while Conan slightly pouted that her paper shurikens won't be used. For now. Ray and Conan quickly found themselves sitting in the kitchen of the village elder who was, coincidentally, the father of the idiot playing a bandit. The bandit group was 10 farmers who thought to make their lives better by stealing. They never thought about the consequences, really. They were currently in Saiza as their spouses and parents were berating them while Ray only sat behind the table, his chin supported by his hands as his elbows were on the table. He happily watched, beaming every time one of these idiots was smacked. Serves them right. Ha! What were you thinking, you? With every "you," the wife of the leader delivered a painful swat on his forehead with a roll of paper. The man was growing quite a bruise on his forehead. I am sorry, dear. He exclaimed with tears and snot streaming down his cheeks. The woman looked as if her anger was sated after beating the man, but Ray was a petty person, too petty to let it go. You know, if it was any other shinobi you would be all dead. He exclaimed cheerfully, attracting attention as he started to explain his reasoning. It was obvious they were not bandits but farmers from some village around. This is the only village around though. Hence, your actions could have cost this village its life. He told them with a fake cheerful eye smile, still beaming at them. The woman brokenly turned back to her husband, snarl on her face as she gripped the knife in her hand tighter. Oh shit. Ray excitedly thought as he used his chakra string to get the knife from the woman, making her turn to him. No butchering your husband. You can beat him senseless though. Ray, I smiled. With pleasure. She cracked her knuckles as the terrified man let out a manly high-pitched squeal. Ray just watched in amusement as the idiot suffered a beating or 2, or 10. After all, he was the mastermind and every man in his little group had a spouse, or mother, or father that wanted to tear him a new one. Ah, what a fine way to spend an afternoon. Nothing beats watching some well-deserved justified violence. Ray grinned from ear to ear. The village they were in was a very out-of-hand, peaceful if a bit too poor one. They didn't need the outer world much. They could make enough clothes, grow enough food, and even had some cattle. They were not affected by the war much except that more merchants were passing by their village in recent months. Which was a good thing. The reason for banditry was that their crops for this year were very, very poor. This happened at least once per decade, so it was not a new situation. The men would just need to go to the town and find some work there for a few months in order to buy enough food for their household. Nothing new. The problem was the war. The towns would not let them get work. They were barely able to function as it was. They could not take new workers. The village would starve. It was an apparent and very distinct possibility for the village, and it was looming over their heads, getting closer by the day as their food supplies dwindled. But the villagers knew they indeed do have a way out. But the merchants who passed usually had enough money. And they more often than not looked for a companion on a cold night. If men could not make enough money, women could. That was what drove the man to try his hand on banditry. He just didn't want his wife to sell her body in order to ensure their daughter will have enough to eat. It was clear the villagers were mostly resigned, and one of them was rumored to even start offering his 3 daughters to the merchants for a night. Ray could believe it, the girls did not look happy when he saw them. Gloomy and resigned. But this was the reality of this world. And yet, here they were. The villagers sharing their food with him and Conan. He couldn't do anything but shake his head at the kindness of these people. That's why he was now, in the middle of the night, standing with Conan on the edge of their field. They surprisingly grew potatoes. He and Conan connected their hands and focused on molding chakra. Apparently one could use chakra without molding. They could grow a tree without molding. But if one adds molding, it becomes a jutsu. Because molding gives the chakra a kind of a manual direction. It strengthens the effect exponentially and makes chakra possible to affect the world more. For example, Hashirama had a lot more chakra than Ray and Conan together. But even he would be able to raise at most 30 trees with his chakra supply alone. But when one added molding and made it into jutsu, he was suddenly able to raise forests and gigantic statues, capable of restraining a bijou. That is why jutsus were so revered. The growth of strength rose exponentially while the cost decreased even more. That was what determined the rank of a jutsu. How much stronger it was comparable to its cost. Of course, higher rank needed higher destructibility. Also, one cannot spit the ocean like Hoshigaki Kisame with water chakra alone. Oh, Ray tried. But, after he produced only an ordinary spit over 100 times, he gave up. He could only gather water from his surroundings and affect it with his water chakra. Like he and Conan did with the clouds. But once one creates the chakra in his throat and mold it, it suddenly became possible. Same with fire. Same with earth. Same with any element. It was almost laughable, and Ray understood that hand signs were nothing but pre-learned sets of molding. One of the Iwanin had a book about it, but it made no sense to Ray until he realized that simple single thing about molding. Kids are taught hand signs and how to mold their chakra instinctively according to these signs in the academy. Some are better, some worse. But if one wanted to be shinobi, he had to know how to mold his chakra. That's why some people could skip some hand signs. They just could mold the jutsu without them because they were very proficient in it. That's what Ray and Conan wanted to do. But it was hard. Learning to mold their chakra without a crutch. But they persevered. By now, After an entire half-year of on and off of trying, they could still only instinctively mold chakra according to one-hand sign. It was a long run, indeed. They molded the chakra, slowly, kneaded it, and interwove it into their jutsu. It took them 30 minutes of continuous molding and focusing, but finally, they had what they wanted. Mokutan, gift of Mother Nature. They quietly whispered together. A small tree rose in front of them, and as it reached 4 meters in height it stopped growing. Instantly tendrils of wood burst from the ground around it and started to enwrap the tree in a spiral-like motion, leaving not even a bit of the original tree visible. When they were done, it looked like a weird, thick tree with a spiral-like bark. This tree had enough density and the ability to channel nature energy. It did it in 2 ways. First, the outer shell strengthened itself with the energy. It would take at least B-ranked jutsu or chakra metal to penetrate the bark. Impossible for the villagers. It was a precaution from having the tree chopped down by some greedy schmuck. It also looked incredibly ordinary and was masked from the senses of a ninja. Unless it was a senju or sage in sage mode, both would have to be close, nobody would be able to realize what it was. The inner tree though, that was a masterpiece they were able to do only thanks to a year of continuous use of Mokutan and learning about it. It gathered nature chakra and dispersed it into the ground, revitalizing it and enriching it. The fields around the tree would grow crops at an insane rate, and it will be very healthy too. The harvest could be done once per 2 months all year long. Even the dreary weather or winter would not impede it. Ah, the wonders of chakra. Well. That done. Suddenly they heard leaves shuffling from the direction of the forest. They didn't need to be caught using Mokutan. They chose the night to not be, damn it. They quickly turned around and saw. You. Ray and Conan stopped in their tracks as the small 7-year-old girl timidly walked out of the woods. What are you doing here? Conan coldly asked, her eyes narrowing. The girl just looked to the ground as she clenched her old battered plushie to her chest. I couldn't sleep, so I went on a walk. Ray raised his eyebrow. And do your parents know you went on a walk? The girl blushed and shook her head, making Ray chuckle. He came closer and patted her on the head, neither he nor the girl noticing the murderous glare Conan gave the girl. What's your name? He smiled at the girl. Rina. Ah, Rina-chan, is it? Conan's glare intensified as her eyes narrowed. So, Rina-chan, we are helping your village, but for the magic to hold, you will have to keep this secret. Can you do that? Ray squatted in front of the girl and looked directly into her eyes. Rina timidly nodded. Ah, pinky promise. Ray reached his pinky to her. Pinky promise. Rina happily hooked her pinky around his. It will be our little secret, then. He stood up and patted her again. Good girl. Ray's body instantly stiffened as he felt the minuscule amount of killing intent from behind him. He slowly turned around and saw Conan with an impassive expression, only her eyebrows slightly twitching as her eyes were dangerously set on the girl. Ahahaha. He rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. Conan, let's go and take this girl home, shall we? Conan finally tore her eyes from the girl and looked at Ray with a pout but nodded. Later that night, they were in their room as Conan still sulked. Ray approached her and put his hand on her head, ruffling her hair. You should know that I intend to have more women. I already told you. He gently told her. I know. Conan hugged his torso. It's just. I won't allow you to take any useless girl. Useless? Ray tilted his head. Ah, now you are just trying to be cute. Conan blushed and buried her face into his stomach as he laughed. If you want another woman, it will be kunoichi. A strong kunoichi or someone with potential. Conan mumbled. May I know why? Ray asked as he stroked her hair. Because I want to be special. Conan ashamedly whispered. Special? Yes. I want to be the only civilian girl you took under your care and nurtured from the scratch. I want to be special. Conan said with determination burning in her eyes. So, let me get this straight, Ray groaned. You don't mind I will make a harem as long as you are the only girl who joined it as a civilian? Seriously? It's dumb, I know. Conan bit her lower lip cutely. But it is my reason. You will be always special to me, Conan. Rei told her softly. I know. The connection through the seal is ironclad. Conan nodded. You don't even know how many times I wanted to have sex with you. She put her finger to Rei's lips, preventing him from interrupting. I can hold myself until we are at least 13. 3 more years. She said it with such longing and need, Rei almost faltered but his mouth spoke on instinct. 15. Conan pouted but gave a whiny reluctant nod before she continued. But I know we won't be able to separate anymore. You gave me something that day. And I was insufficient. That much I know. I stopped seeing other males as something desirable. They are but strangers. Just thought of kissing one of them disgusts me. I didn't know, Conan. Rei told her and got a weak smile in return. I know you don't feel that way. My soul, it was too small compared to yours. I took what I could take. Those, talents as you called them. And in exchange, I gave you the entirety of what I am. However insufficient it was compared to what I received from your soul. Conan looked to the ground. I am not complaining. I love it. I love you. I know you love me. That you will always love me. It is kind of freeing, really. Not having to doubt it since we are bound, even beyond death. Conan softly sighed but then her eyes went hard. But if you want another girl, she will join us in this bond. She will be a strong kunoichi. And due to my pettiness, she won't be a civilian. If you want a civilian to join, make her into kunoichi first and then, fine. Conan strongly told him. But in exchange, you have to agree that you are my master. She blushed and whispered quietly. Dana-sama. Rei rubbed his forehead in frustration. Shit. I knew telling you the story about Graphia Lucifuge was a bad idea. He mumbled to himself, making Conan snicker. Fine. He sighed in exasperation but then chuckled, bemused. Guess, these are acceptable terms, Conan-chan. Rei started patting Conan's head and saw her closing her eyes in delight as she put her head on his lap and enjoyed the care. Good girl. He whispered to her, making her shudder. He sat there for a few minutes, just enjoying Conan's silky hair, thinking about what he just heard. Yes, he had his suspicions. The small changes in their relationship after the mishap with the link seal were a big tell. Especially since both vividly remembered what happened. He never thought it seemed like that to Conan. He knew they were linked. But he didn't know his soul took so much from Conan's. But it made sense. His soul was older and had even these talents. Hers? It had only itself. The most I could do, is to make her as happy as possible. He thought as he watched his almost purring girl. Why did you let the girl walk away? Conan suddenly asked, her eyes still closed. Yes? The girl. She saw our Mokutan. Conan's ambers softly opened and peered to Rei's emeralds. Ah, she is small. He moved his hand dismissively. Even if she started screaming about people growing trees. Civilians mostly do not know about Senju unless it is in a capital city or some very wealthy and knowledgeable merchant. Even then, nobody would believe her. There is also no proof as the tree would need a Senju or sage to be in close proximity to verify it. It would take either a very hopeful and determined person or a complete idiot to believe her. I see, you basically let her see important information without any danger to us even if she babbled. She is a child. I see. True. Nobody is as delusional as to believe another Mokutan user emerged. Much less two. And with that, Conan tackled Rei to the bed, cuddling with him as they both fell asleep. It will be only years later when the small girl, Rina, finally breaks her promise for the first time. Coincidentally it will be, as Rei put it, a very hopeful and determined person. A very hopeful and determined person who was on the verge of despair as for years she taped in the darkness, having no clue about the spike of nature energy she felt in aim. That person will come to the tree, and her determination will grow exponentially as she will break down crying due to receiving the first clue in years. That person will be able to fully feel the overpowering life force permeating from the tree to the ground because that person will be Senju, and since she felt the spike of nature energy, her feeling for nature energy started slowly growing. She will feel finally at home, feeling the chakra in that tree. And she will be completely aware of what kind of a powerful Mokuton technique this was, as the nature energy will engulf her senses. And as Conan put it, she will be delusional enough to believe 2 Mokuton users emerged. And Tsunade Senju will be damned to not find them. Without their knowledge, this small act of kindness toward the village will mark Rei and Conan as a target, no, an obsession for a very determined kunoichi who won't stop at anything to find them. Even if she had to turn the elemental nations upside down, rock by rock. 4. The sensitivity of Senju works in both directions. As she could somewhat feel the nature energy, the nature energy could feel her too. While not sentient, it could carry intent. Tsunade was too close to the linking, and the intent clearly connected. It made her soul tremble as it felt the connection that was made. Even Tsunade didn't know why, but she wanted it. She craved it. And, unknown to her, a minuscule part of her soul was already not hers. Rei and Conan woke up at noon, cuddled together, only to find out that the village is teeming with life. A particularly big caravan arrived in the morning, and villagers were helping to unpack the tents, set a camp, and whatnot. Rei and Conan clothed themselves and went out with the intention to go to the woods to train. On their way, they were stopped by a man. One of the merchants. He was a burly, thuggish-looking man a little under 2 meters with shaggy black hair. He ogled Conan's body as if she was a piece of meat. "Girl, wanna earn something?" He grinned at her. The worried village elder was about to intervene when the man blinked and then froze. The tip of Rei's chikudo was right under his neck, as Rei coldly said. "Try anything with my girl and your head will fly." "Understood." The man started quivering. He might be strong, but the boy in front of him was fast. "I asked if we understand each other." Rei asked, his lips curling into a chilling, menacing smile as the tip of his chikudo stabbed a little into the man's neck, just enough to draw blood. The man wanted to fervently nod his head from the sheer fear he was feeling, but then he remembered the sharp pointy blade on his neck and gulped. It hurt. Yes. He shrieked. Good. Rei smiled sweetly at the man. And don't forget. This was your only chance. Next time I won't be so lenient. He took his chikudo away from the man's throat and the man nodded fervently. Come on. Rei turned to Conan and gestured to her to follow with a slight gentle smile. Rei and Conan returned to the village in the evening, exhausted from their training. They entered the house of the village elder, heading to the room that was given to them for 500 ryo a day. Their insistence. The man needed it and they didn't plan to stay longer than 3 days. Tomorrow they will be off. As they neared the staircase, one of the merchants suddenly approached them. Excuse me. He smiled amiably. May I talk to you for a while? Conan looked at Rei, who noted with the corner of his eye that the merchant spotted their little exchange but didn't comment. Rei felt something fishy about the man, but he was clearly a civilian. Shrugging, Rei nodded and continued up the stairs with Conan. The merchant, getting the message, followed silently behind them. They entered their room and Conan quickly flopped onto the bed. They were exhausted, not dirty. When one learns to draw water from the atmosphere, creating a bath is easy. Conan was always giddy when they bathed. After all, both Conan and Rei long ago forsake the propriety and started bathing together, going as far as making out during it. They wouldn't have sex until their bodies were physically ready, and both were fine with that much intimacy. A bit of touching and kissing though. Rei, seeing that Conan was already in the world of her own as she hugged her pillow to her chest with a blissful smile and daydreamed, decided to entertain the merchant. He gestured to a chair in the corner and sat on the edge of his bed. So, how can I help you? The merchant rubbed the back of his head. Ah, I am Kurubo Cesaro. Nice to meet you. Rei Yatsuba. Rei smiled and nodded. Actually, I wanted to ask if it would be possible to hire you to act as my bodyguards. I am actually heading out of the aim as my business is concluded, you see. I am afraid to meet bandits along the way. I saw you handle Munuro this morning and immediately decided to try. He laughed awkwardly. Rei pondered. The man was going out of aim. That meant, they may be able to cross the border if they will be checked as his bodyguards. Sure, they could cross it even without it, but it would be much more dangerous if they were caught by either the country they were leaving or the one they were entering. This basically gave Rei a valid and legal reason to do so. He smiled at the man and decided to ask more. I am tempted. But tell me more. How long would you need our service, the pay, you know, the usual. Rei told him casually. Kurubo, seeing Rei basically agreed if the conditions are good enough, decided to be quite generous. I offer you 500 ryo each per day. Rei raised his eyebrow at that. While not much, alright. But if they accept, they would tag along at least half a month, and that's without crossing the border as the civilian speed is very slow. That would be 500 ryo for half a month. 500 ryo per day may seem a little insufficient, but it is quite generous in this day and age. Especially since there is no village backing him and Conan. This would be a classic C-rank mission. Meaning they should get 50,000 ryo if they were from a shinobi village. Well, not really, since AIM is a war zone, but Rei doubted the merchant wanted to walk into a skirmish. Anyway, that amount would be divided between teammates and the village. Let's say, the village takes 10%, who was he kidding? It would be more. Anyway, hypothetically 10%. That is 5,000 off. Assuming it is a standard Jonin, 3 Genin team from Konoha, the Jonin would get a lot more than Genin. 20,000? 15,000? Maybe. The Genin would be left with 10,000 each or less. More likely than not, less. So, Kurubo's offer of 7,500 for each Rei and Conan was fair. Incredibly so. They looked like children but showed skill. Kurubo probably didn't want to spend the entire 50,000 ryo for a proper team and wanted to save some money for himself. Now, if he wanted Rei and Conan to accompany him further, their paycheck would only get fatter, and if they left AIM, that would be considered a win in Rei's books. Okay. How long and to where would you need us to tag along? Rei asked carefully and observed the man's mannerisms. It would not do for him to lead Conan into a trap, after all. Kurubo weakly smiled. I am going to Mizu no Kuni, if you prove to be good, I would like you to accompany me there. Rei froze. This was starting to sound fishy. Mizu no Kuni, fishy indeed. That would take them to cross multiple borders and at least 3 months of travel by land to reach a port town and another few days on a boat. The paycheck was also big, but most importantly. Don't worry. You will be able to leave whenever you want. The man started nervously waving his arms around. Rei nodded. We can accompany you. But one of these days, you will tell me your real reason for approaching us. Rei told the man sharply, making him stiffen. Kurubo could only stiffly nod with a broken smile. I promise it is nothing detrimental to you nor your companion, but I must know if you have skill first. If you don't, excuse me for my language, then it wouldn't matter. Rei could feel the seriousness in his voice and accepted the answer. Fair enough. We are setting out tomorrow at noon. We will be there. And with that Kurubo left, leaving Rei alone. Thinking about this encounter. In the end, it is beneficial for him and Conan. If they manage to cross to other lands. Especially one of the big 5 where almost no skirmishes were happening, they could let loose more in their training. Right now they always trained and slept with one eye open to avoid ambush.